Welcome back to the Grown Up Millennial. As you can probably guess from the title, we're going to be talking about how to be environmentally friendly on a budget. I want to start off by saying that climate change is real, not getting into an argument about that, but also, even if you don't necessarily believe that the earth is getting hotter or that humans are a cause of that, you have to acknowledge that we are degrading the environment, that we're using a lot more resources than we can reasonably replenish, that there's lots of pollution and plastic waste and trash in the oceans and the water and on the land, and that animals are going extinct at a really high rate. So even if you don't acknowledge the climate change aspect, I think we all can acknowledge that humans are having an impact on the earth and the environment, whether it's the water or the ground itself or the air or the animals. But the reason I want to make this video is I think that there's a tendency for environmentalism to sort of be a thing of the upper classes, almost sort of a trendy thing, which is unfortunate because we all need to pull together, everyone needs to get involved. And part of the reason is that a lot of environmentalism, at least when it comes to how people perceive it, tends to be about swaps. So instead of using a gas-powered car, use an electric car. You know, instead of getting your electricity from the grid, put up solar panels. Even small things, right? So instead of using a plastic toothbrush, use a bamboo toothbrush and compost it. Or instead of buying a $1 set of Tupperware, buy this $20 set of metal tins. And while swaps are great, we definitely want to be moving towards more sustainable, reusable materials in our products. I think it can be kind of off-putting, but also just unrealistic to lecture people that they need to be swapping them out. That's something where I think environmentalism, or at least how we talk about environmentalism, is sort of missing the point. And if you scroll through Instagram, you're gonna see a lot of this as well, this sort of focus on aesthetics and swaps, and buy this environmentally friendly product instead of this less than friendly product. And again, that is an important part of environmentalism. But really what it comes down to is we can't buy our way out of this. When we think of environmentalism like that, buying the eco-friendly products over the non-eco-friendly products, we're still buying a bunch of stuff and using up a lot of resources. And unfortunately, we just don't have enough resources to do that. Ultimately, we're here because of too much. Of using too much land, using too much resources, putting in too much pollution into the atmosphere, making too much trash, making too much waste. It's about too much. It's not something that you can buy your way out of. It's something really we need to accept as a planet, as a culture, as a society, that we need to be living on less. Fortunately, when you come at it from a less perspective, suddenly it becomes a lot easier to be environmentally friendly on a budget. So for this video, I'm not going to be focusing on swaps. Everything that I reference should be something that you should be able to do without spending any additional money. And also shouldn't take a bunch of additional time. So let's get into the actual things that we can be doing to be environmentally friendly on a budget. Number one is support environmentally friendly policies, initiatives, and legislators. So this doesn't necessarily, you have to be donating your money because again, this is friendly on a budget, but when it comes up for vote in your state, county, city, whatever, try to support those that are acknowledging the environment and have some actual plans in place. This can be supporting building of a new solar or wind farm. It can be expanding public transportation to kind of cut down on cars on the road. It can be moving towards more high density housing where instead of like one house taking up a lot, you could have a small apartment building and house several people in it. We need to be supporting these initiatives because as much as I would love to say that individuals can get us out of this mess, we got in it together, so there has to be a collective component to this solution to environmental impact. Number two, eat less meat. So I'm not necessarily saying everyone has to go vegan or vegetarian, but it's just not sustainable for us to eat as much meat as we do. So there is kind of a hierarchy in types of meat. So lamb and beef are going to be the most resource intensive animal products, and then like eggs, chicken, fish tend to be the least resource intensive. But even eggs, chicken, and fish are more resource intensive than plants like soy, lentils, chickpeas, legumes, etc. Everyone just needs to be more comfortable with eating less meat. It's not realistic for us to eat meat every meal or even every day, to be honest. Now, do you need to throw out all your meat? No, but start moving towards doing meatless Mondays or making breakfast and lunch vegetarian. The benefit is that plant sources, at least like lentils, chickpeas, legumes, etc., tend to be cheaper than meat. They're also more shelf stable, so they tend not to go bad as quickly as leaving meat in the fridge or the freezer. So I'm going to put some like references in the description below, but just as a high level, to make a pound of beef, it requires about 16 pounds of grain and 2,500 gallons of water. So the grain, obviously the cow is eating it. It's kind of inefficient to turn 16 pounds of grain into 1 pound of beef when you could just eat the 16 pounds of grain and feed a lot more people. And the water, you see all that water going in both producing the plants for the cows to eat, as well as the water that the cows are actually drinking, as well as the massive amounts of water it takes to clean and sanitize beef processing facilities. You don't have that same issues when you're growing legumes and lentils, for example. It's also why chicken, eggs, and fish tend to be better, at least from an environmental standpoint, because they take up less land, less feed, less water. But again, your plant sources are always going to be better than all of your animal sources, pretty much. And there's a couple scenarios where it's not, but 95% of the time, plant sources are going to be better for the environment than animal sources are. Number 3, no matter what you are eating, reduce your food waste. So I believe it's anywhere from 25 to 40% of the food that America grows is thrown away. It's never even eaten. And this happens at the farm level, so particularly with fruits and vegetables, if they're not aesthetically pleasing, won't even make it to your grocery store. Your grocery store will sort of overstock to make it look like a bounty, and then they'll throw away what they don't sell. But also Americans, we just tend to buy more food than we need, and when it goes bad, we throw it away. We're not always very thoughtful about what we're buying and what it's going to turn into meal-wise. Now, why is this bad? Well, first, you lose all the resources that you took to grow the food. So all that water, land, fertilizer, etc. But in addition, when you put organic material in a landfill, it is in an anaerobic environment, meaning an environment without air. So, it gets compressed with all the trash on top of it. And when organic material decomposes in an anaerobic environment, it creates methane, which is another greenhouse gas like carbon, except for it traps 20 times more heat than carbon does. So we have much more carbon in the atmosphere, but methane is more potent as a greenhouse gas. So we want to be wasting as little food as possible. Also, again, it's going to be friendlier on your bottom line to not waste food because you paid money for that food. So how can you do this? Well, you can start at the front end by just buying only what you need. So being a little bit more thoughtful about what you're purchasing, focus on more shelf-stable items, again, like rice, beans, nuts, seeds. Those things don't tend to go bad very quickly. And if you're buying fruits and vegetables, make sure that it is fruits and vegetables that you actually know how to cook or that you're actually going to eat. And then on the back end, really it's being more mindful about what you have in your kitchen. So making sure you shop your kitchen before you go grocery shopping. Try to use up what you have, but also moving food that needs to be eaten towards the front or being deliberate about eating that up. If there's something that you don't think that you're going to be able to eat before it goes bad, then stick it in the freezer. You can do this with greens, you can do this with cut up vegetables or even fruit, or even like if you make a big pot of soup or like a meal, like you've been meal prepping, put that in a Tupperware container and stick it in the fridge, and now you have a single serving of a meal that you can have later when you didn't think of what to cook. But we just need to be more mindful. And finally, thinking about what you can do with things that you otherwise would throw away. So for example, the ends of bread, neither of us really like that. But I will dry it out and then turn it into breadcrumbs and put it in my freezer, which you can see in my last video on my pantry tour. Or, you know, I'll spoon out the rest of a tomato paste can and freeze that to use later on. Or broccoli. Everyone likes the tops of the broccoli best, obviously. But then you have the stalk, which is kind of a waste to throw that away. So I start shredding it, and I'll make like little fried fritters out of it, or I'll mix it in with potatoes, or I'll even throw broccoli stalks when I'm making a soup, right? So just being more thoughtful about all the things that you're buying, making sure you're using it up, and making sure that you don't throw it away. Number 4, buy less stuff. So I know in the world of Amazon and the internet, we just want to buy stuff. If it piques our interest and we have the money, we might just get it. Something I like to do is if I'm really interested in something, I will put it in my wish list on Amazon or in my cart even, but I won't buy it. I'll wait a few days, and if I'm still thinking about it several days later or even several weeks later, then I might buy it, or I'll even look at other ways to get it. But 95% of the time, I realize I can live without it. A really good example is like with makeup. I know makeup is a big thing right now. I don't wear makeup, and I'm not going to make fun of anyone that does. You know, if that's something you really enjoy, great. There are some, it can be an art. But maybe don't go to Sephora or even the drugstore and buy makeup just because. Like, maybe we should be focusing on using up what we have, particularly since makeup expires. Like, I never understand people who get like, yay, I have 100 lipsticks. And it's like, you can't reasonably use all of those lipsticks, and they're all gonna expire before you can use them. So just focusing on what are the essentials, what do we need, and using those, and moving away from like collections. Number 5, if there is something that you want, try to borrow it instead of buying it. So a really obvious example is if you're a bookworm like me, using the library instead of buying your books. Another example, we do a lot of DIY on our house, and we have a fair amount of tools, but there's a lot of tools that we don't have and really would only need for like 1 or 2 applications. Sometimes we'll get this urge like, oh, let's go buy it, and then we'll stop and think, oh, well, do any of our parents have that? So we'll give our parents a call, and 9 times out of 10, they do have that tool, and we'll just borrow it from them instead of using it ourselves. So be more thoughtful. What can you borrow from others, and what can you loan out to others instead of just buying a new thing just for you? Number 6, if you are going to buy something, try to buy it secondhand. So a great example is clothing. I know you hear this a lot about thrifting or even using eBay or online thrift stores like ThredUp. The thing is, fashion industry, producing clothes is one of the most polluting industries ever. Not necessarily so much on the carbon, although it is, but more of like the dyes and the bleaches and all the chemicals that produce clothing goes into waterways, particularly in less developed countries. And you know, you can make an argument of those are jobs, but ultimately we cannot, as a planet, support buying so many clothes. There's just literally not enough material to keep up like this. So instead of going to like H&M or Forever 21, try to do thrift stores or go on eBay, or even again, just be more thoughtful about like what kind of clothes do you actually need. This can also apply to things like electronics, appliances, furniture, really anything. I know there's some things people feel a little squeamish about buying secondhand, but really try to look at what you can be buying used to avoid creating that new thing and putting in all those resources when there's plenty of stuff available that's going to be cheaper because it's used, and most of the time still just as good. Number 7, reuse what you can. So this isn't necessarily like a swap, but I think all of us have like old Tupperware or food containers or old t-shirts and ratty towels that we can be using instead of disposables. So for example, instead of using paper towels, use an old rag, or instead of buying new Tupperware or food containers, I like to use pasta sauce jars. You may have noticed them again in my pantry tour video previously. You know, we use old toothbrushes to help clean the house. I do use a metal water bottle, but I think everyone, even if you buy like plastic water bottles, you can just hold on to like one of the plastic water bottles and keep filling that up instead of going for a new one every single time. So try to rely on reusables where it makes sense, where you can afford it. Number 8, avoid packaging where you can. So I think the easiest place to do this is with fruits and vegetables. So a lot of us, you go into the store and you grab those produce bags and you fill it up. You do that over and over and over again. But I think you'll find that with most produce, there's really no need for it. Pet peeve, I did see a guy at a grocery store who put a single banana in a plastic bag, and it haunts me to this day. But things like bananas, oranges, watermelon, pumpkins, things that have rinds that you're generally not going to eat those rinds anyways, they don't need a bag. But even things like zucchini, broccoli, things where you're going to eat the whole plant, I still don't put those in a plastic bag. I'm gonna wash them at home. Or if if I have the option between a bag of flour wrapped in plastic or a bag of flour wrapped in paper, I'll try to choose the one wrapped in paper because paper can be recycled and composted, whereas most plastic bags cannot. So I'm not necessarily saying you have to pick the most expensive option because this is a budget video, but try to be more thoughtful about the packaging that you don't need. As another example, my partner and I love Taco Bell, but we always ask for no napkins because we have plenty at home. We ask for no sauce packets because, again, we have plenty of stuff at home to season our food. When we do go out to eat, when we get a drink, I ask for no straw. Stuff like that, where you can just sort of avoid these disposables because you don't necessarily actually need them. Number 9, try to walk and use public transportation more. I do think sometimes we can get a little bit lazy or rely on a car too much. Now, my partner and I, we do have a car. We only have one car because we decided that that's all we need. We don't have 2 vehicles, but we do have a car. But I walk to the library, we walk to the grocery store, we walk to our favorite pho place. We try to go places that we can walk. Or even, because we live in a suburb outside of LA, when we're going down into the city, we will take the subway because it's more environmentally friendly, it's cheaper, and we don't have to deal with parking. So we do try to pick public transportation options or walking as much as possible, and then use the car when we just can't. Number 10, you probably have heard this a lot, but use less water. So, this can be as obvious as don't let the water running, but also, for example, our kitchen sink leaks, we're currently working on it. Plumbing's a bit of a mess in this house, but I keep a bottle under the sink tap at all times so that it drips into that, and then I'll use that to water my plants. So at least the water's not getting wasted. Similarly, we keep a bucket in the shower, so when the water's warming up, it will go into the bucket instead of down the drain, and again, I will use that to water plants. We also take short showers over long showers and instead of baths. There are items of clothing that will re-wear, so if we only wore it for a couple of hours and it doesn't stink, we'll hang a shirt back up, we don't wash jeans more than once or twice a month, depending on how often we wore it. And this is pretty common in other cultures. I think a lot of Europeans and Middle Eastern people, for example, are gonna go, what? Why would you why would you wash it if you only wore it for a couple hours? But in America, it's like as soon as it touches your body, nope, can't be worn again. And that's just silly, because it's gonna cost you a lot more in water, or you have to do the laundry more times, even if you use a laundromat. So re-wearing clothes, when they don't stink or they're not dirty, those are all ways to sort of save water. And again, that's good for the environment, but also it should be easier on your bills and your bottom line. Number 11, use less electricity. So again, this can be as simple as turning off the lights when you're not using them, to as a little bit more, I guess people consider hardcore, as using your AC less. So for example, we live in LA where it frequently gets over 100 degrees, so we do have an AC system and we do use it. However, instead of setting it at like 72 or 78, I won't even turn on the AC until it hits at least 85 inside the house, and then I only cool it down to about 80. So as a result, we really only use the AC on days that are 95 degrees or hotter, and usually only for a couple hours in the late afternoon when it's just really, really hot. And then usually by like 7 o'clock, we'll turn out the AC, open all the windows, turn on the fans, and let some air blow through. So our electricity bill is a lot lower than our neighbors. We also just try to choose smaller or more efficient electronics. So I work off of a laptop instead of a desktop computer because it is cheaper. Because it uses less electricity. Number 12, live in a smaller space. So again, this is probably really obvious, particularly to people who have less money. I think there's this tendency in the United States to try to live in as much square footage as possible, whether you're renting or you are buying. And as a result, we see that the size of new homes being built is ever increasing. I think now it's up to high 2000s or 3,000 square feet per home, which is just, considering how small families tend to be now, it's kind of a lot of space. It's a lot of land to dedicate to one person or one family, but also the larger your house, the more it costs to heat it, the more electricity you tend to use, and also the more furniture you end up buying to fill all of those empty rooms. And buying furniture, each piece of furniture requires a bunch of resources to produce it. So overall, living in a really large space when you don't need to is not so great environmentally. So my partner and I struggle with this a little bit. He loves really large homes. I would much rather live in a smaller space. We have about 1,500 square feet, which isn't huge, but it is a little bit more than we need for 2 people and a dog. So some of the ways that we try to make this more efficient is we do rent out our 3rd bedroom that we don't use to a friend of ours. So instead of having it as a spare bedroom, because people sleep over, I don't know, once or twice a year, so we just use an air mattress for that. Why dedicate a whole bedroom to being a spare bedroom? So instead we rent it out, so now she has a place to live, we get a little bit of extra money, and we're making more efficient use of our home. But just overall, try to pick the smallest space that you can feel that you're comfortable in, that will meet your needs. Generally, these spaces are going to be a little bit cheaper, and they're going to be more environmentally friendly. Number 13, be vocal about environmental impact. So I'm not saying you need to go out and do protests or you need to be a jerk to people about their decisions. I think we need to have a little bit more courage and get used to a little bit of discomfort. You know, when we talk about the things that we buy or the things that we do, we'll talk about cost or, you know, our comfort preferences, or even like, I prefer this color over that color, or I prefer this style over that style. I think the environmental impact of our decisions should be voiced as well. And as a result of doing that, by acknowledging this in conversation, and again, it can be as simple as, oh yeah, I bought this item because it has less packaging, or I'm not eating meat today because it's Meatless Monday, and I'm trying to be a little bit more friendlier to the planet. Things like that. Just an acknowledgement that environmental concerns are part of your decision-making process. By being a little bit weird and acknowledging that, it helps other people start to think about it, and then they start acknowledging it. So I've actually seen this in effect. So I will bring like these cloth bags and jars when I go shopping. So I'll fill those up and I'll have them weighed, and it's a bit of a process, but that way I can cut down on packaging. And I'll have people in line behind me go, oh my God, I never knew I could do that. So by, you know, and I didn't run around going, you know, you're all bad people for using plastic. This is what I was doing. I was being open about it, not a jerk. And other people notice and realize, oh, that's something that I can do. I didn't even think that that was possible. Similarly, when we sit down with friends and I ask for a drink without a straw, I'll notice that other people at the table will then say, yeah, no straw for me. It's something that they might not have been thinking about, but now that I acknowledge it, they realize, oh, that's something we can do. Yeah, I don't really need a straw. I can just sip my drink. Stuff like that. When we're just a little bit more vocal without being rude or condescending, but acknowledging the environmental impact of our decisions, it helps other people be able to do that as well. Number 14, I think we need to care about aesthetics less. So I know, I don't want to say this is a recent thing. Humans have always had trends and fashions fall in and out of favor. I mean, you can see this throughout history and throughout time. But we're sort of in a unique period where those trends can change so quickly. And if you're a person that values being trendy or being current, it sort of requires that you have to keep buying stuff and throwing away old stuff to meet those trends. And that's just not sustainable. We literally, it's not just on a theoretical level, we literally cannot, as a planet, have everyone buy and throw away so many things. So I think we need to care a little bit less about having, you know, the fancy items, whether it's the kitchen gadget or the meal prep containers or the clothes or that lipstick, or I think we need to care a little bit less about that. It doesn't cost us any money to care less about that. I know it can be uncomfortable. It can be sort of difficult when you're making that decision and other people aren't there yet and you're scrolling on Instagram, but ultimately that's what it comes down to. We just need to care a little bit less about how we look and a little bit more about what we're doing and what the impact of our decisions are. Hey, this is Editing Jessie here. So one other thing I forgot to mention is this search engine called Cozia. So it's like Google or Bing. You use it to do searches on the internet. But the way Cozia is different is that they use their ad revenue to finance projects that plant trees. So trees are super important for getting carbon out of the atmosphere, creating oxygen, reducing soil erosion, etc. So I really love this search engine. You can do it as an extension on Google Chrome, and it functions very similarly. Up here in the corner, you'll see we have this little counter, so that's how many searches I've done using Cozia. It is, after 45 searches, that's usually how much ad revenue it requires for them to plant a tree, so I like seeing that. And it functions pretty similarly to Google. You can even do searches in the address bar. Only thing to be aware of is it doesn't have all of the little extra goodies that you get with Google, but honestly, to me, that's a very small price to pay for such an impactful search engine. So let me know in the comments below, what steps do you take to be more environmentally friendly on a budget? Any tips that I didn't cover, any information that you think would be helpful for those sort of struggling with this or trying to figure out why does any of this even matter? As always, you guys have great points down in the comments, so I would love to read them. And then, you know, as normal, subscribe, like this video, share it. So, you probably saw this little guy in my thumbnail and he went through this whole video and went, where's the plant? So here's the plant. His name is Zachariah. I'm not a big houseplant lady yet. I have 2 houseplants, but this being my second. I don't know why I feel compelled to name them when I have a ton of plants outside that don't get names. But this was a present from a friend of ours, so. Zachariah thanks you for being more environmentally friendly, I guess.